Where to begin except to say that it's important to recognize Bob was being very serious when he said we like to think of ourselves as visionary and forward-looking and imagining what is coming, telling you about all these amazing things and also helping you to sort through them. But we really didn't anticipate that our book would come out at a time when America was having a serious discussion about socialism and fascism. And so much of what we wrote about has rocketed forward. We were lucky because as we were concluding the writing of the book, many of these developments have started to occur. So we've integrated them in and we see them as a part of it, but we can't tell you exactly what will happen this year. What we can tell you is this, and this is important. The reason that we decided to write this book, as Bob has begun to tweak out, is because we recognized an incredible disconnection between what we were seeing as we traveled the world and went to international conferences, some of which are held at castles, quite appropriately. And they're filled with people who dress very well and drink mineral water and by all accounts love their children. And, you know, they are the CEOs of major companies, Google and Mozilla and other firms. And we were, especially I was able to be in these meetings because some of our previous books have become kind of a big deal in Europe. And as a result, you get invited to, join. And then as you come the second or third year, you're sort of accepted as part of the group. They forget that you've written, rather more critical books about issues that maybe they don't always agree on with you. And so you become part of the discussion. You're not sneaking in or anything. You're just there. And they let their guard down a little bit. And they have the discussions, the normal discussions of CEOs and billionaires and wealthy and connected people and people who run think tanks today. And the normal discussions that they have are about nothing except the coming jobless economy. This is a huge topic for them. They talk about it all the time. They actually have these, they have whole lit up boards, where they will show how many tweets have been sent in the last, 2 minutes and how many Facebook posts. They literally, the one thing you realize very quickly is that we can't even begin to imagine how much they know about us. They know so much. They gather so much data from us that they are on top of it at levels that make, the poor NSA folks can just run to keep up. But the interesting thing is that they don't look backward. They do look forward. And so when they have these conversations, they literally talk, not in some draconian way, but they talk about the industries that are going to disappear. They talk about the jobs that are going to disappear. And they aren't talking about menial jobs or drudgery. They're talking about good middle class and even upper middle class jobs. This is not something that's going to happen to somebody else. This is something that's going to happen to people you know. And when they have these conversations, though, they don't have it in that way. They're delighted by the bells and the whistles and all the things that show up on their screens. And they find it this fascinating, interesting future. And it's always going to be okay for them because they know something that most of us only begin to recognize, or we put it in a different language. We don't connect to it as well as we should. They know that if they take away, not out of some desire, they could care less about getting rid of jobs. It's just a way to save money. Eliminating industry is just a way to make money. Automating is just a way to make more money. It's not, they don't hate you or they don't hate the job. They just want to not have to pay you money to do it. And they know a very interesting thing, which blows away all of our thinking. Because we're still locked in the Henry Ford past of 100 years ago. We think that the CEOs of major companies, when they make products, right, that they will pay us a good amount so we can buy the products. They think we, the consumers, are part of something with that. We're not anymore. That's not how they think of it. That's not how they think of it. Because they live in a world where they know that we are quite willing to redistribute massive amounts of wealth upwards. We don't object. We actually let them take immense amounts of money and, really kind of alter the whole economic structure. We basically say, well, some of it'll trickle down on us. And they know also that they can do global trade deals that literally take away our small d democratic rights to make fundamental decisions about the environment, about work life, about our communities, about almost everything that matters to us. And they know that by and large, even though we don't like it, we will elect people who tell us that they're going to make them better the next time. Yeah, NAFTA didn't work. Okay, China free trade will be better. Yeah, China free trade didn't work. Well, CAFTA will be better. Well, CAFTA didn't work. Well, the TPP will be better, right? It's always going to be, somehow it's going to work. And they know that somehow they keep doing, these CEOs know that keeps happening. And this is the thing they know, the biggest thing they know. We, the people, we like to eat. And some of us like to eat more than others, but we generally like to eat. And so they know that when they reduce the number of jobs, when they wipe out whole industries, we will not say, hold it, I object. Because we didn't object when they wiped out whole industries with their trade deals. We didn't object when they massively culled out our workforce. We haven't objected 40 years into stagnant wages. We haven't objected to the change from a situation where one person in a family could work while someone else stayed home with the kids, and while we had enough income to actually do all these things, and our kids could go to college, and instead of having massive debt that would last through the rest of their lives, it was actually something you could pay for with a part-time job. We didn't object to any of those changes. So why would they worry that when they take away massive numbers of jobs? Because they know that we will work harder. We will come earlier and stay later. We'll keep trying to cobble together an existence. I know this is going to sound crazy. They believe that we will take our private cars and troll around the streets of cities trying to pick people up and give them rides for a little bit of money, and we'll come some crazy German word like Uber or something like that. They believe that will happen. They believe we will get so desperate that we'll take rooms in our homes and rent them out and call it Airbnb. They believe correctly, that even as they cull out stable jobs that have real hours and schedules and benefits and enough pay to support people, they know that we'll just keep trying to cobble something together. And so they don't see this as some sort of bad calculus. They believe that there's a whole bunch more wealth to be redistributed upwards. And they also know something else. The last institutions that will ever talk about this in a serious way are those that make up our media. They know that our media will never, ever say, hold it, we're stopping this ridiculous conversation about Donald Trump's hands, because we can see in the foreseeable future Eric Schmidt, the head of Google, the top experts at Oxford, the people that really do work on this stuff are telling us we are within years of a progressively more jobless economy, and maybe that matters more than Donald Trump's hands, right? They know the media won't do that, because the media is a dumb beast. It is a dumb beast that just simply wants to be fed. And the smartest politician in America is Donald Trump, because he just keeps feeding it something more, and that dumb beast follows after him. So they know so well. No, I'm not kidding about this. They're well aware that they're not going to get called out by the media. And they know something else. They know that our politicians don't know how to talk about this, don't bother to talk about this. Our politicians don't like to tell us scary things. Our politicians don't like to entertain real discussions. When somebody tries to do it, we shun them off to a third party. We say, and we make it hard for them to get on the ballot, and then if they do get on the ballot, we don't let them in debates, and we keep pushing them aside. I mean, whether you like Bernie Sanders or not, do you realize that that there are studies. He has gotten 1/10 as much coverage in this campaign season on all media as Donald Trump. 1/10 as much in basic, I should say, in broadcast media and evening news, stuff like that. And in fact, on one network, ABC, at the end of last year, they found out Donald Trump had an 80-to-1 ratio of coverage. This is ABC Evening News. But that was cheating. That was actually, because they had rounded Bernie Sanders' 1 up to 1. It was actually 20 seconds. So it was a 240-to-1 ratio. So somebody's trying to actually have a little bit of a serious discussion. Forget it. And they know that our politicians, most of them have been trained, well trained to feed the dumb beast. And so they're having these discussions. And they're deep into them, and they're very serious, and they worry about it a little. They know that there's going to be problems. They slow down some things they do because it's overwhelming. But they're deep into it, and we're nowhere near it. We're on the sidelines. We are pushed aside. We are left out. And we are in terrible danger that everything we know will change, and it will be changed by a handful of people sitting in a distant room and telling us it is the only alternative. This is what we must accept, as we must accept austerity, as we must accept wars that we don't need. All these things, we have to accept this too. Now, do you know what the interesting thing is? We already refuse to accept it. They're wrong. This is a really weird thing because something bizarre has happened this year. There is only one way to explain Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. There's only one way to explain them. A 74-year-old Democratic socialist from Vermont who has dedicated his life to struggle for economic and social justice, and a billionaire populist who has dedicated his life to finding his third or fourth wife, and who has literally, who literally does press conferences after he wins primaries that are infomercials for his incredibly lame products. No, last night he was actually holding up Trump magazine and talking about what a great magazine it is. It's so great, they give it away for free. But we got both of them. Why do we have both of them? Why is this happening? It's not that hard to understand. 18, 19, 20-year-old kid in this country has grown up marinated in new technology. They literally, I go to conferences all over the world, and they talk about artificial intelligence. We open the book, there are 15,000 people around the world now who have sent away for a chip, programmed it, cut their finger open, inserted it into themselves, put a bandage around it, sealed it in, and then let their skin heal so that they have a microchip in them that can open doors, start computers, do all sorts of things. They physically altered themselves to keep up with computers. 15,000 people have already done this. This is a detailed fact. And the interesting thing about it is that, in this context, young people are well aware of what's happening with technology and where it's going. They literally try and take a phone away from a kid, right? The artificial intelligence experts said at one time, maybe we're going to have to genetically modify ourselves. Maybe we're going to have to, do all sorts of selection things to keep up with computers. And they said, no, it turns out we already genetically modified ourselves. We gave them a phone that had all this power and put it at the end of their arms, and it's now growing into the arm. It can't be separated. We know that. And the kids know that too. They look at the future. They look at this gig economy. They look at all this structural reality. They're told that they have to take $100,000, $200,000 worth of debt just to get a degree, and then they're told that there's probably not going to be a job for them at the end of it. And so they have already voted with their feet. They've gone to a Bernie Sanders rally, right? Bernie Sanders getting 85% of the vote of young people, as Bob pointed out. So this political reality is already playing there. Now, it's not articulated, and shame on Bernie Sanders for not fully articulating it, for not, he's very, very good at chronicling the decay. He's not as good as he should be at talking about what's coming next. I'm not condemning him for that. I'm just saying that there's a pivot here that he has work to do too. But then the other alternative, who's blowing up on the things on the Republican side? Who's causing an unexpected vote? This Trump guy. Now, the people at his rallies are not young. They're much older. There's a lot of 55, 58-year-old guys who lost their job at the factory, and then they did some retraining, and they ended up in a lower level paying job. Remember, the term retrain is not a promise but a threat. And they then kind of got a job in a warehouse, and now they're working at the Quickie Mart, and they're thinking things aren't working out too well for them. Right? So they go to a Donald Trump rally, and you know what Donald Trump says to them? Make America great again. Keyword being again. Let's go backwards. Let's go back to something. Well, how do we get back there? Well, the only way we ever go backwards, right? We look around the room, we find somebody to blame, somebody who doesn't look quite like us, and we blame them. We divide people enough, we make it ugly enough that we can go back to some glorious past. Well, the fact of the matter is we can't go back to any past. But what Trump is saying is so attractive, it's gotten to the point where he's very likely to be the nominee of the party of Abraham Lincoln and Teddy Roosevelt and Dwight Eisenhower. This is big deal stuff. What I would tell you is we've already come into the moment. It's not articulated. Our media doesn't cover it. Our candidates don't even talk about it well. But the politics of our time is already reflecting this. It is the only way to explain what is going on right now. And what's going to go on next is going to be more volatile, more complex. And so we have to ask ourselves, how do we get out of this? How do we get, because this poor woman sitting up front is starting to look a little bit scared. Slightly depressed. You know what? Our book is an optimistic book. It is a very optimistic book. Because we detail all this, because you cannot be an optimist without knowledge. There is no such thing as a naive optimist. That's a fool, right? It is. No, knowledge is what allows you to be optimistic. An understanding of what's really going on, and then coupled with history, when you understand what has been done when we have gone through this before, because we have always gone through this. This has happened again and again and again. Technological progress has caused radical dislocation, radical changes in our lives, and we have struggled to figure out how to deal with it, what we should do, and we have made terrible mistakes, and then slowly we have figured out again and again and again how to deal with it and how to reassert our power over our own lives. And I'll use just one example. In the book we write about, there's a lot of history in this book because the history is what empowers us. 200 years ago, we had an industrial revolution that was every bit as dislocating and radical and wild. At a time when people believed that kings and queens served by the divine right of God, right? Suddenly everything they knew was being blown apart. How many of you have gone on a vacation to England? Right? How many of you went to a village? One of those cute little villages with thatched roofs and a church in the middle of it and maybe a little commons and that. And you thought, maybe if things work out for me, I wouldn't mind living in a place like this. This looks pretty idyllic, bucolic, and wonderful. Well, in the north of England 200 years ago, that's where people lived. The villages were where they lived. And you know what they did? They had little looms in their houses and crafts, and they actually made things. It was very creative. They sustained themselves by growing food. They had their children around them. And while it was certainly imperfect, no doubt about that, it wasn't absolutely perfect, it was not such a bad life. And then suddenly people came along and said, you know what? We can make a lot more money if we take all of you out of the villages and move you to cities and put you in slums and have you work in big factories on these huge looms, and maybe even we'll bring your kids in and we'll chain them to the machines and let them work there too. As this was happening, William Blake, the poet, said, he looked at these and he said, these are dark satanic mills. Dark satanic mills. He said, you will lose your humanity. And the people realized that as well. And so you know what they did? They responded as the way many people do to technology when it first comes in and changes their lives. They decided to destroy the machinery. They took as their hero an imaginary figure, King Lud, and they went into the mills as Luddites, and their other hero was Captain Swing, the guy who with one swing of a hammer could destroy an entire loom. Right? And they ruined factories. They tore apart the machinery of the future because they were so terrified that it would make their lives horrific. The British government was so terrified by this, so horrified by this reaction. These people saying, we do not want to be wrenched out of our existence as we know it. We don't want to be turned into something that we are not. That they sent the troops to Lancashire in the north of England. At one point, as we chronicle in the book, there were more British troops in the north of England putting down the revolt against this change than there were fighting Napoleon. This was how much it scared them, but they won. They beat the Luddites. They beat them. And then the Luddites had to go and work in the dark satanic mills. And they worked from before dawn till after nightfall. But they would gather. They couldn't gather in churches. They couldn't gather in town halls. They would gather on full moon nights in the woods, on the top of hills. And they would talk to one another about what they could do to stop this, to get their lives back. And they thought about, do we destroy? Do we form armies? Do we kill the people that are doing this to us? They looked at all these possibilities, and nothing worked for year after year after year, and yet they would keep meeting in all these tiny clubs and talking. And then somebody said, you know what? Maybe the problem isn't the technology. Maybe the problem isn't even, some of these core economic ideas and the powerful people that implement them. Maybe the problem is that we don't have any power, that we aren't at the table making the decisions. And so in a very short amount of time, we talk about this in the book, it's a wonderful thing. When that realization swept through England, people started to say, we don't need to talk about all sorts of big structural economic changes. We need to talk about one thing, democracy. We need to take control of the politics of this country so that we can begin to influence the economics of this country. And they formed a Chartist movement. In 1 year, they gathered more than 3 million signatures on petitions. When those petitions were rejected, they gathered 4 million. They marched. They died in the struggle for democracy. And in a short amount of time, they instituted universal suffrage. That means all men could vote initially. Then they changed the political processes. They eliminated corruption in their politics. They forced honest elections. And within an amazingly short amount of time, they began to open the door to trade unions, to child labor laws, to a social welfare state, to votes for women, to a transformation of the circumstance of human beings. They did not make everything perfect, but they pushed the politics to a place that was radically different, and then they pushed the economy itself to a place that is radically different. If you don't think that is the case, just imagine this notion, an 8-hour day. Just imagine this notion, an end to child labor. This is the kind of thing, they remade work and they remade society because they had to. And we chronicle in the book that the same thing happened in America 100 years later with the populists, progressives, leading into the New Deal. We always think that some great guy came along and showed us the way out. Well, the smartest politician this country ever had, who never won an election for president, was Eugene Victor Debs. The head of the Socialist Party, ran for president many times at the start of the 20th century. And he said one time, Mr. Debs, you're such a great guy. He says, tell us what to do. And Debs said, if I could lead you into paradise, I wouldn't do it. Because if I could lead you in, someone else could lead you out. Don't trust the politicians, trust yourselves. The fact of the matter is, we are entering into a point in our history where we don't have an option of whether to demand a democracy where we literally are in charge. And I know what you're going to say. You will say to me, yeah, but see, we live in the worst of all times. We live in the most difficult of all times. It was so easy for those people working 12, 14, 16-hour days and chained in the machines. They had it so much easier than we do now. And so there's no way we could do it. It was so easy for the women who fought for voting rights, 100, 150 years ago. All they had to do was starve themselves and get chained to things and beaten and jailed. That was a breeze. It was so easy for people who fought for civil rights. It was so easy for the trade unionists who were literally machine gunned down. It was so easy for the women who worked at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. It was just so easy in the past. It's harder now. Wrong. It's not harder now. Our challenge is to understand that we have made tiny demands. We have asked for so very little We have objected so little when they have taken so much. And now they propose to take our jobs and our livelihoods and every bit of the structure of the lives that we know and radically change them. And our answer should not be to say, yes, we will work harder for less. Our answer should be that we were promised technology would yield wondrous benefits for all of us. Every great inventor, every great thinker said that technological progress would free us from drudgery. It would free us from slavery. It would free us from everything that was evil and wrong in our lives and allow us to live beautiful and good lives. That's what Tesla said. That's what Einstein said. That's what Edison said. Every one of them said the technology would make our lives better. And they were all right. But what was wrong was we let the powerful and the rich take all of the benefits for themselves. Well, brothers and sisters, it is time for us to understand we can't give it up anymore because they will take it all. It is time for us to organize at a level that we never have and to recognize that as these changes come forward, it will not be that hard because it will be so overwhelming for so many people that they will turn to us and say, what do we do now? Our answer has to be, we will not do what Donald Trump proposes. We will not turn on our neighbors. We will not turn against our fellow human beings. We will do what Thomas Jefferson, an imperfect president, proposed. We write about this in the book. 200 years ago, at a time of great economic turbulence in this country, John Adams, horrible president, John Adams started taking away basic liberties. He started to jail political opponents. He started to jail newspaper editors. They used the so-called Alien and Sedition Acts. At that point, 200 years ago, Jefferson, the vice president of the United States, broke with the sitting president. He was at odds with him. They feared Jefferson himself might be jailed. A friend wrote to Jefferson and said, what are we going to do about all this? Jefferson calmly wrote back and he said, in a matter of time, the reign of the witches shall pass. Their spells will cease to have power over us because we will look around at all the people around us. And we realize there are so many more of us than there are of them. And we will realize that we can decide the lives that we will live. All that we must do is hoop ourselves together and march against them. Brothers and sisters, it's already happening. We have a $15 in a union movement. We have a Black Lives Matter movement. We have a climate change movement. We have a rising trade union movement. More than 200,000 more people are in unions this year than in last year. Even as they have battered and fought and banged away on us, people have still organized. We have a response that is shaping. It is time for us to hoop it together. It is time, people, to get ready and to say, we will shape our future, not theirs. Thank you.